expertise there, and that's also why we got this connection with the UN, and also became an alliance member of the group, and also really adhere to the vision of the Ocean Decade. So before we continue, I thought maybe it's good to have a short introduction from all the people here on stage. I think it's best that you introduce yourself. So Julian, maybe you can say a few words about yourself. Obviously, being very involved in the UN.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Mark. So my name is Julian Barbiere. I work with the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission, and I lead the Marine Policy program, and also the implementation of the Ocean Decade, which started in 2021 with my colleague Alison Clausen here, who's acting as deputy coordinator. And we've been trying to build a global movement around the idea that in order to achieve those sustainable development goals, we need massive solutions, science-based solutions that can really help countries to reach those targets, whether it's in the areas of pollution, of biodiversity protection, of ocean and climate aspects, but also looking at how we can really boost investment in ocean science and in infrastructure that is needed to generate the appropriate knowledge.
Okay, you will get some more time to explain that in more detail, Julian. Thank you very much. Rachel, thank you for being here from the company Van Oord.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Terry. I'm head of sustainability for Van Oord. For those who don't know Van Oord, we are a Dutch family maritime contractor. We operate on a very international level. For anyone who knows Dubai, very recognizably, we are one of the companies that constructed the Palm, or one of the Palms, I should say. But basically, you can imagine we are an implementation partner. We deliver solutions, and mostly we are working in the coastal and maritime infrastructure market. We work a lot with offshore renewables, so offshore wind is one of our very biggest business lines. But we are also very active in delivering nature-based solutions for coastal protection, and more recently, ecosystem restoration.
Thank you, Rachel.
And I should probably add we're very youngest member of the corporate data group for the Ocean Decade.
And you will get the chance to explain why. So thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel. Erik, over to you.
Thank you. My name is Erik Giercksky. I'm with the UN Global Compact. The Global Compact is the private sector arm of the UN. Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of UN, is our chairman. We have our headquarters in New York. We have about 700 staff in 70 countries. And our mandate is really to rally all the non-state actors to be part of the solution of the 17 SDGs in a principle-based ways on climate, on biodiversity, on the social side and good governance side. And I'll get back to that. I'm heading the ocean work myself, come from the shipping sector, and really glad to see so many friends here during the last few days. And it's really the business that's delivering at this COP. The governments are slow, but the businesses, they are ambitious. So very happy to be here.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about that. So thanks, Erik. Jan-Bart, online. Thank you very much for joining us online. So I hand over to you for a short introduction. Somehow we can't hear Jan-Bart yet. See if we try again, Jan-Bart. No, we're getting the technology hopefully sorted out.
I will try again.
Okay, try again.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. So thank you for the invitation, and I'm very sorry I cannot be with you in person. Nevertheless, a pleasure to participate in a very important panel discussion today. My name is Jan-Bart. I'm the lead manager of the Decade Coordination Office for Ocean Data Sharing, which was set up earlier this year, hosted by IOC's Project Office for International Oceanographic Data and Information Exchange, also known as IODE, located in the beautiful Kingdom of Belgium. As the name suggests, the DCO for Ocean Data Sharing has an important role to play in the decade to coordinate the data sharing component and activities, and support decade actions to find the data and information they need, but also provide the guidance on how and where to share the digital assets and resources that they generate. And that includes the private sector, which is increasingly collecting vast amounts of ocean data and information, as you all are very aware of. And these are invaluable if we want to advance our knowledge on the behavior of the ocean and its functioning in, among others, regulating climate. So this is a topic of great interest to our mission and objectives, and we're glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan-Bart. It's great to have you here as well. And I think you introduced it extremely well. This panel discussion will talk about how the private sector is actually try to be connected with what is required for the oceans, for the science that we need for the oceans that we want. So this is the most important element there. And there's a lot of data in the private sector available that could be shared with the scientific community, with the academia, to actually understand a lot better what the climate is actually doing and how important the oceans are for changing or solving the problem that we face with the climate. So this is the whole idea of this panel discussion as well. And it's coordinated by the Ocean Decade, and that's where Julian comes in for that coordination. So Julian, maybe you can explain actually how it works and why and how you have set up the Ocean Decade.
Okay, so now is my time.
Yes, now is your time.
All right, so indeed, and you can see on this slide a little bit the framework around the decade, which is really centered about action and delivering science-based action. As I started to explain, we have identified 10 decade challenges, which are basically where we want to be by 2030 in terms of delivering scientific knowledge, but also generating new skills, new capacities, and basically supporting action in those 10 areas, which include climate, pollution, biodiversity, food security, but also the blue economic aspects. And then the infrastructure really is how we improve our ocean observations, how do we better integrate data, and of course Jan-Bart will talk about that, how we build community resilience amongst a few things. So if you look at this, and the only way we can really achieve these objectives through the actions is really to ensure that the information and the knowledge is coming out strongly from all of those decade actions. And therefore, the aspects of ocean data is really at the core of what we are trying to do in the ocean decade. A few elements that I think are important for us to consider. Of course, we need to generate data in areas where we don't have data, and that's still a challenge in many parts of the ocean, at different depth, but also geographical areas in certain themes where we don't have we're not able to characterize some of this ocean process, for example, ocean and climate processes. We need to also make sure that the data connects with users, and this is really our best guarantee that the data will actually be serving a purpose and will actually help decision makers and companies and governments to take the right decision. So we're trying to connect those dots, the data provisions with the needs of specific users, whether they are economic sectors or they are, for example, marine spatial planning managers who have the task of developing a plan for the coastal area. The issue of access and dissemination is also one of the important criteria, which is cutting across all actions, and particularly open, free access of data is something that we want to promote as a global practice around the world in the countries. The issue of processing and integrating data is also very important, because this is one of the big challenges that we have, and the fact that data are sitting in different silos, and really how we can bring some of those data sources through interoperability, through this digital ecosystem, so that we can have a better understanding of some of those ecological but socio-economic processes as well. We need to also invest in capacity development, because we know that the world is not equal, and many countries out there do not have the data infrastructure, and therefore rely on the data provided by global north institutions who have all the capacity. So we need to also, by the end of this decade, ensure that we have those aspects supported. And then, of course, there's the aspects related to innovation and technology, which is growing fast with artificial intelligence, the capacity now to develop models and forecasts. And I think we really need to start thinking about not just projects, but really service that we want to provide to society, which is really sustained over time, like we have weather services. We need the same thing for the ocean, and really that really implies building up the infrastructure and the sustainability of a process. We have a few challenges, and I'm sure you're all aware about it. We have a lot of data, which is also a good news in a way. We hear that environmental data is almost doubling in terms of numbers every couple of years. It's not faster. But we also have data which is not being accessed and used. And we have the Seabed 2030 initiative, which is, which has the ambition of mapping the seafloor by 2030, the whole seafloor, and so far we are at 25%. But and I refer back to Jamie McPhillips, who's the leader of this initiative. We estimate that there's about 20% of equivalent of seabed floor surface, which is sitting in a research database, in governmental institutions, and so on. So I think our idea is really to try to create a movement where we provide the incentives for sharing and really demonstrate that the benefits of sharing are stronger than the benefits of actually keeping the data. So that's something that we want to change at the policy level and also help countries to open up those data and because we also have a number of legal and national challenges in data sharing, and I think we need to try to get commitments from countries at that level as well. So this is why we, realizing all those challenges that we started to look at data really as one of the cornerstone of what the decade wants to achieve, and we started to work in developing a dedicated data and information strategy. And I'm not going to say too much about this because Jan-Bart is going to be talking about this. But it's really about this global ambition in the way we are transforming and collecting, managing, and sharing data beyond the 2030 milestone. So this strategy has been published, so it's already out there. We are now in the phase of going into the implementation phase, and we will actually be launching the implementation plan in the Barcelona Decade Conference, which will be in 2024 in April, and we hope to see you all there. And maybe if we can go just to the next slide, so I can also say a few words about the way we are organized. So the Decade is a global movement, but we are very much decentralized in our approach, and we are working through a number of Decade collaborative centers, Decade coordination offices, and those are basically institutions with an international mandate, with expertise in certain domain that are taking leadership in coordinating Decade actions, in promoting the development of new actions and bringing the community together. And within that, we have also a number of cross-cutting groups, which also include, of course, the data coordination group and the corporate data group, which is, and I want to also, recognize the leadership of Fugro and of you, Mark, and your team, because this is really an effort to open up some of those data that are sitting in companies and really provide a platform for all those companies to work together and to find pathways for making those data available. Because what we have quickly found out is that there's actually willingness and interest in doing that, but finding the pathways and where is the data going to go and how is it going to be used. We need to also address some of these issues. And I think this group that is now emerging, that's been in place for now about a year, is really starting to go into the nitty-gritties of things and looking at different pilots, and one of them is going to be focusing on bathymetry. And I think we will hopefully soon be able to demonstrate and showcase, what is the contribution of those companies that are really making that step forward. So I think this is looking positive. There's still a lot of work to do, but I think we, thanks to the support of Fugro, and I think it also helps to have a company speaking to other companies, because in the UN, although we have the UN Global Compact with us, and they were purposely built to do that, but for the organization I come from, where it is actually the scientific community and the oceanographic community, this is still relatively new. So we need your help, and I think we are making good step forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Julian. And I think you said it well. I think it's bridging that knowledge that I think we have in the scientific community and in the UN, and what we want to achieve with the private sector. If we can bridge that gap, and Fugro is trying to help with that, and I think that is that is, we see the first successes of that, and I think it's quite good. And we'll talk a little bit more about that a little bit later. But what you see on the board here is there's obviously different teams here, and obviously Julian is in the decade coordination unit there. And then Jan-Bart is in the decade coordination office. And then we have multiple people. Obviously, Erik here is part of the UN Global Compact. And then we have myself as Fugro, and also Van Oord representing in the corporate data group. And we'll talk a bit more about that a little bit later. But maybe first to go over to Jan-Bart. You work together with Julian on the goals of the Ocean Decade and focus specifically on Ocean Decade data and information strategy and the data coordination group. Can you say a bit more about how you approach that and what you're doing exactly?
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you. It's exactly as Julian has said, because the access and use of digital resources are so important for the success of the decade, that in 2022, a decade data coordination group was set up with a mission to develop this specific data and information strategy, which it did. And it was released earlier this year. And it is an ambitious strategy, really, with the ultimate aim to animate and create what we call a vibrant, trusted, and inclusive global digital ecosystem actively used for decision-making to support sustainable ocean management. That's the vision. Management based on solid science, which in turn is based on robust observations and data. To make that work, this interoperable data sharing framework that needs to be underpinned by a distributed but interconnected data and information infrastructure that allows those operating in the decade to easily discover, access, use, and share ocean data. And I don't have time to go through the entire strategy, but I would like to zoom in on a few of the strategic objectives which have a specific relevance and make reference to the challenges and opportunities that the private sectors may be facing when they would like to share their data resources. So the first strategic objective deals with creating this ocean digital ecosystem in a way that allows all actors, wherever they are, whatever their capacities, to use and contribute to the system. So, and this also includes, obviously, the private sector. This is very important, and so our hope is that through the corporate data group and other private sectors interlocutors in the decade, they could help us to define what interfaces, support mechanisms, and tools they need to be able to contribute to this ecosystem efficiently. The second strategic objective is to improve data and information discovery and usability. And that really relates to making the data fair, meaning findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And here I would like to note that making data fair does not mean, per definition, it's open data. I mean, there can be certain restrictions applied, and this could be important from experience for the private sector to have some control over how, for what reason, and by whom the data is used. For us, most important is that the data is fair, and then, of course, as open as possible. The third strategic objective is to build trust in the data and information that is shared across this digital ecosystem. And this is dealing with issues such as transparencies, clear information on the quality and provenance of the data, clear terms of use, and licenses for reuse. And here again, this is of particular importance for the industry, both in terms of using and contributing to this ecosystem. If we expect industry to share their data, it's clear that they need to have trust in the repositories who will be archiving and sharing their data. They need to know that these will be sustained and secured over the long term to be assured that certain requirements and conditions are met in terms of attribution, ownership, licenses, recognition, acknowledgement, and in some cases to ensure protection or control, access, and use. The last strategic objective that I would like to bring up here is the need to expand and empower and mobilize global communities to advance and maintain the ocean digital system. So this is really, has to do with people. Mobilizing the community, to educate and train the people, building data literacy, so that they are able to build, maintain, and continuously evolve this digital ecosystem, and are also motivated and convinced that this is important to do so. This objective includes building bridges to non-traditional groups and potential data providers, including the private sectors. And again, here we have to make sure that we provide the tools, resources, and build capacity within the private sector to be a key contributor and user of the digital resources under the decade and beyond. It also includes the need to incentivize, regulate, and reward data sharing and reuse for existing and new data to effect a cultural change where sharing of ocean data is recognized as an essential good to society and becomes ingrained in all ocean-related activities and communities through a combination of incentives and regulation. And also this is very applicable to the data sharing by industry, which may be requiring specific adapted policies, regulatory frameworks, and incentives. And that brings me to an important enabler that we have identified also in the strategy work, and that deals with policy and regulatory frameworks, because it's important to promote policies that encourage and incentivize the sharing of data and information, leveraging existing regulatory frameworks and establishing new regulations that enforce these policies where and if needed. And I would like to bring in one such regulatory framework that we could leverage, that is the licensing regulations and procedures for offshore activities. Often in this context, offshore companies have an obligation to collect data in this process and during the operations to assess the impacts, for example, sand and gravel extraction, offshore wind projects, and maybe one day sea mining activities, deep sea mining activities, no doubt. These present an opportunity to ensure that these data are not locked in reports on shelves, but shared for others to reuse. And here I would like to point to a good example, and I think that's also a responsibility that we have in the implementing this data strategy, and the work that the DCO has to do is to make visible all of the good examples that already exist where industry and private sector companies have been sharing data. A good example is the Crown Estates in the UK. Crown Estate acts as a manager of the seabed and much of the coastline around England, Wales, and North Ireland, and has a unique opportunity working with industry and stakeholders to collect and make available data and evidence for reuse, unlocking the blue economic potential in a sustainable and rational way, supporting wind energy sector, helping the nation's transition to sustainable and decarbonized future. Now, in 2013, the Crown Estate created the Marine Data Exchange, which is a world-leading database of research and evidence freely available to everyone. And it contains more than 260 terabytes of data on biodiversity, geology, and most of it is collected by industry itself, considering preparing for projects or for monitoring environmental impacts of the activities. So I think there are some very good examples that we can build on and that we can extrapolate to other areas. Another example that I want to give in terms of partnerships is when I was in China not so long ago, attending a Digital Twins of the Ocean conference. I saw some very good examples on how public-private actors are working together to collect data at a regional and local scale, at the bay level, for example, the Guangdong, Hong Kong, Macau Greater Bay Area, where they are pooling together these data resources and creating data lakes, which can then be used for running local digital twin ocean applications. And this is of benefit, obviously, for the companies working offshore there and public authorities responsible for managing the space and protecting the environment. So to conclude, just wanting to reiterate that we are now developing an action plan together with an implementation group, and that will be launched, as Julian mentioned, at the Barcelona conference next year in April. And I'm very happy that this is also facilitated through the work of Louis de Margne from the DCO and IOC, which is both helping and assisting the corporate data group, as well as the strategy implementation group, making sure there is cross-fertilization between two groups. So I will stop here and hand over back to you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jan-Bart. Very well explained. And what we have, if we go back to this this graph here, the system and the different groups that we have. So Jan-Bart was very much talking about also the data coordination group. So how do we actually share the data? How can we organize ourselves in a better way? And what is the format of the data? And how should we get that done? Another element that Jan-Bart was mentioning was the corporate data group. And it's something that we actually only started, as Julian said, less than a year ago in February this year. We have now 10 corporate members of the corporate data group. I'm co-chairing that with the executive secretary Vladimir Ryabinin from IOC, which is really powerful, I think, because we managed to actually lure in quite a few companies now. We have the goal to get up to 15 major companies to really get a group together that can actually work on the solutions together with the data coordination group to make sure, okay, they have all the details and how the data should be organized and how it should be shared. But the willingness of these companies to actually share the data is enormously high, but very often they don't know how to do it. We also struggle a little bit with some of the countries that actually have the full ownership of data within their own economic zone. And we need to actually get to the situation where these countries also start to understand that they need to free up and unlock this data so that it can be shared. Because many of these companies have done work, as we discussed, for instance, for wind farm developments in the economic zone of a particular country. But then the data ownership and rights are still with the country. So it is different in every country, and it makes it a little bit complex and complicated, but this is something that we need to get going on as well. And this is also a discussion that we have in the corporate data group, and I know also in the data coordination group. So this is really important. We need more companies to obviously join. So if you have great ideas of companies that need to actually join this corporate data group, then please come up with suggestions. And as soon as we have that group together and we're already working on the solutions there, then we'll come up with a framework together with the data coordination group to say to everybody out there, and we're liaising with the associations in the world as well, the industry associations on the fishery, on maybe the cable installation for fiber optic cables, but also the wind associations, to say, well, we buy into this idea, and all the companies being a member of these associations should actually start to share data with the scientific community. So that's the ultimate goal that we have, and we feel that this is very well possible if we manage to overcome the barriers. And there are some barriers, and they sometimes relate to who owns the data. But so the legislation and intellectual property, licensing, taxation is a topic that we try to address in these discussions, so that everybody has a way to say, well, this is a proper way to share data, and it's not a problem for us. So this is very important, and therefore we're also very pleased that recently we had Van Oord joining this corporate data group, which is very fresh, and therefore I'm pleased that Rachel is here in the team as well on stage. So Rachel, maybe you can explain why you felt that this is important to actually join this corporate data group, and maybe entice people to also start joining.
Okay, let's see who else we can lure in. So I think something important to say for those who don't know, Van Oord is operating a fleet of around plus minus 80 vessels all over the world. So what you can imagine when we are operating on projects all over the world is that we are collecting a lot of data with those assets, and usually fundamentally for the service of the projects we are executing. So I think one of the main questions we asked ourselves when considering to join the corporate data group was, can we make changes in how we operate our assets or our vessels that can actually lead to more societal value than what we are delivering directly in the projects we're executing? And I think you can look at that twofold. A lot of the discussion goes around the existing data, which we have already collected in all of those locations all over the world. But also the opportunity to, maybe with small changes or additional instrumentation on our fleet, what additional data could we collect which is needed by the scientific community to advance to the ocean that we would like to have. And I think that connection with the scientific community and research is something we have done for all of our history as a company. So when we wanted to develop and build more in nature-based solutions, what do? We get together as an industry, also together with the relevant scientific institutions, and we develop together with science and industry, because you actually need both parties at the table to bring these things to life. And I think some really nice examples of projects where we have data which could be very relevant for the scientific community to build on would be, for example, if we're building an offshore wind farm, which we have built many in the North Sea, and we just started in the US, you have to collect an immense amount of data for the building of the offshore wind farm, but also during the building process, we need a lot of meta-ocean data to operate our vessels within those areas. And we're collecting all of that data, and then what happens with that data once we have finished the offshore wind farm? Well, I think this is a perfect place where we can bring that data in for it to be used for a higher purpose. And another thing where we see huge, fast-growing discussion is around the data related to biodiversity. We've recently executed a project in Adu City in the Maldives, a climate adaptation project, so to create higher, more climate-resilient land for them. And of course, that's an area which is very busy with a lot of coral and a lot of seagrass. And we did an immense amount of coral relocation in that location, and we used a number of different surveying techniques to look at the coral, what it was like before, what it's like after, and we monitor, but then we are finished with the project and we step away and we go to our next project. But then how can that data also be useful in the biodiversity sphere as well, which we see as a hugely fast accelerating area, which is good, by the way. And I think the last thing to say is it's fundamentally the right thing to do as an organization. If you collect all this data and at some point you don't need it anymore and you're just going to sit it on a shelf, what better thing to do than to bring that into a setup like this and allow it to be used for the betterment of the ocean? We think that it can create better awareness around data that's needed, that we look at when we look at the ocean. And it's important to connect different stakeholders in these discussions. And we've done a similar exercise. We work a lot in coastal resilience, climate adaptation, and we built there what we call the climate risk overview, where we mapped all the coastlines of the world and we looked at where is the land low-lying, what are the populations in those areas, what's going to happen in the different IPCC sea level rise scenarios, and therefore which coastlines in the world are most at risk from sea level rise and very severe weather and storms. We also overlaid different biodiversity ecosystems to see whether mangroves would be a good solution for those coastlines, or coral, for example. And we did this and made this platform public for exactly the same reasons that we are here in the corporate data group, because we just believe you've got to make this public, you've got to put it out there so you can start the discussion, create awareness, and connect with other stakeholders so that we can all create a better world for future generations.
Wonderful. You said it very well, Rachel. Thank you very much. And I think it's a great example what Van Oord is doing actually, for their work and what is needed for their business, and then how the data can be reused for the scientific world. And we have so many great other examples as well with people in the corporate data group on the fishery side, or for instance involved in fiber optic cable installations all around the world. They collect a lot of data, and a lot of these data is not really required at very high resolution. So if we talk about the Seabed 2030 initiative, where we try to map the whole world, so to say, all the oceans by 2030, and only 25%, as Julian said, is only mapped. So that resolution is relatively low, what is required there, but it's very important that we get that data. So there's a lot of data already available for many of these customers or clients out there from Fugro, where we can actually help also to basically connect with them and say, well, hey, you're actually collecting this, or we have been collecting this for you. Can you actually share that at a certain resolution with the scientific world? So that is basically what we're trying to do here. And I think, Rachel, you gave some great examples there, how data can be shared. Now, going over to Erik, because Erik, you're a slightly different role with the UN Global Compact, and how is that getting involved in this initiative, and how is that connected? Because you're also really looking at how companies, all the CEOs of these companies, voluntarily joined you to really do something good for the oceans as well.
No, absolutely. I think that's a key word. If this is going to be voluntary or mandatory, and we were discussing before the meeting, David, that I'm coming from the shipping sector. You know, Fugro is a shipping company and biodiversity company maybe. But first of all, the shipping sector is very well regulated. You know, it's very interesting. You have a minimum standard for wages. You know, there's a social standard in shipping. You don't get a license to operate if you don't have your IMO credentials. Same on energy efficiency, on climate, and on ballast water and biodiversity. It's the only industry with a proper global regulation. And talking about offshore wind, we don't have that. It's actually Texas, you know. It's open end. There are no, if you apply for an offshore wind license in Norway, New York, or India, it's a different ballgame. And we can't have it like that. It's a big concern. So actually, again, it was the private sector who came up to us saying that, I mean, what can we do? It's so hard. We have to scale up this offshore wind. And it's random, these processes. These licensing processes are not on the same level. And I totally agree with them. I mean, it's not good enough. We can't have a voluntary contribution level on this very, very important industry. And today we have 61 gigawatt capacity deployed globally. We're going to have, for every windmill today, we're going to build 6 more the next 6 years. So if you see a windmill, in the next 6 years, we're going to have 6-fold the number of windmills. By 2030, by 2050, we're going to have 33 more per windmill deployed today. That's a hockey stick development. And we can't have a voluntary-based system on what's the nature impact, what's the climate impact, what's the social impact. And to get that ball rolling with the governments and with the companies, we needed transparency on data. So it's not data for data, it's data for the license to operate. Extremely important. It has to be a trust-based global system, clearly based in a UN setting, but where all companies, we have to start voluntarily because we don't have that mechanism now. And that's why we started an offshore wind sprint together with companies and governments. US, EU, Korea, Ireland, a few others, but mainly companies like yourself and Ørsted and Iberdrola and so forth, SSE, to see how can we at least start now to identify what kind of data types do we need to have in these kind of aligned licenses, and how can they address these issues. So that is an input to the very important decade process. I think my take is that the companies are very ready to share their data, to create an alignment. We had a big offshore wind tender in I won't name the country here, but some months ago, where no requirements on nature impact. No requirements. So if you as an investor then go and invest in that project, 3 years down the road, your board asks you, so what's the nature impact on that 1,000 square kilometer seabed infrastructure that we're owning? Oh, we don't know. We don't report on it. We don't have to. It doesn't cut it, you know. So the expectation from investors, from insurers, from class societies, hopefully after a while, and the international bodies will come, and we have to make it science-based, and we have to make it a trusted open source. Some data have to remain competitive and secret, of course, but the rest should be open. So Jean-Stéphane Nas in my team in New York has been leading that work with many people here. I think that's been a very important undertaking for us. We have learned a lot, and we want to do the same in fisheries, in aquaculture, etc. Because this has to be uniform at the end of the day, so that the investors, the operational companies, and the governments don't run ships, they don't run fish farms, they don't run windmills. It's the companies who do this. So the companies are standing in the firing line here. So they need this to happen. And it's our role as the UN Global Compact then to tell this to governments and then to make sure we have strong institution globally that can actually put this into force. So there's no license to operate without good data that can be monitored and verified.
Yeah.
So I hope that was kind of an
fantastic,
answer.
passionate, statements there. I think it's really important that we actually, get more countries to get on that same train, moving in the right direction. We have fantastic examples like Norway, your own country, where data is completely open source, everything is shared, everything is logged together in one system, and this is, I think, the way to go. We're, as Fugro, involved in many developments ourselves as well, and we have no problem sharing data, but the data is very often collected by our customers, so they need to give the go-ahead, and then they need to have the go-ahead from the countries where they're actually operating. So, and then only then data can be shared. So we need to get the regulation in place, the policies in place to actually be able to do that. And then we need to ask the scientific world, what do you need? What kind of data? Is it current data? Is it wind information? Is it salinity? Or is it water depth, like we collect for the bathymetry database for seabed 2030 and JEPCO? So there's still questions to answer there, and we're trying to basically get those on the table and then focus on a few data sets that are really important and missing at the moment. In the end, all the data sets are required. Like you say, also ecology, biodiversity, very important, mammal observations, and so on. Everything is quite important there. So we are getting to the end of the formal part and then open up for some questions. I think the key messages are that we're really trying to make progress by involving the private sector. They are very willing to act. They need to get basically policies and regulations in place to be able to know how to share the data and to be able to do that also in the right way. And then we need to obviously interest more companies to actually start doing that. And eventually all the industries, from fisheries, from maybe cable installation parties, from wind farm developments and energy companies in general. And I must say there's a very large willingness of all these companies to do this. They want to participate, but very often they don't know how and what to do exactly. In Barcelona next year, in 2024, Julian, you spoke about that. The conference is coming up. We want to show tangible results in what we have done with the corporate data group. And I think we're getting there. And that would be great, because then within a year, we really show tangible examples of what we can do if we work well together. So I thank you very much for your comments up till now, and maybe there will be some questions for you, but let's open up for questions from everybody that's here in the room. And I see a hand going up, and we need to get a microphone. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you.
Hi. Hey, this is terrific. My name is Bruce Applegate. I'm the Associate Director at Scripps, and I'm in charge of ship operations. And we operate a fleet of ships that are part of the U.S. academic research fleet for scientists who are going to love this, right? I'm curious, though, we've got a process by which we acquire data, calibrated data, and then we archive it in a systematic way across the fleet. I'm just thinking about data dissemination and the findability of data that you all collect. I mean, what are your thoughts on a good way forward for putting all these data in a place where it's findable by scientists?
Yeah, so there are multiple people here in the room that can answer that. But maybe Jan-Bart, you want to give some comments on the data formats and what you have currently been working on?
I'm not going to go into the technical specifics of data formats. I think the question is in a way related to the global interoperable sharing framework that we're trying to set up. And we are not trying to work towards a global data repository or database. That's impossible. We have experience from various regions that working through a distributed system is best. And so the idea that we have put forward is to develop the Ocean Data and Information System, ODIS, which is starting in development in different phases. And the first phase is ODIS catalog, which is a metadata catalog of sources, where we point to and harvest where different data sets and digital assets are available in thematic, regional, or national data systems. And so there are good examples, I think, already in the past from projects where specific sectors have contributed to set up a data platform. One example is CMORG in Europe, which was set up in 2005 together with a number of oil and gas companies, where MetOcean data was shared in a platform that was a metadata catalog where you could search, discover, find, and then negotiate the access and retrieval of these MetOcean data, which were collected by the companies such as Shell, BP, Total Energies, and so on. And if you allow, I mean, the concept is a little bit to semantic interoperability, to make sure that all of these different platforms are visible in this global architecture, which allows you then to centrally query and search where certain types of data are available, or data products, and which brings you to this regional, thematic, or local data system. So that's a little bit the idea and the concept. So basically, every small community or bigger community working with industry or industry-public partnership can set up its own system or work through an existing platform, as long as that's speaking to this global interoperable sharing framework through ODIS. So that's a little bit the concept that we have in mind. I don't know if that responds to your question.
Yeah, thanks, Jan-Bart. And I think we can give some examples. Maybe, Julian, you want to quickly talk about what we're trying to do on the bathymetry side, or I can also ask Jamie maybe to say something.
Yeah, let's hear from Jamie, because Jamie represents one of these global repository.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example of what we're trying to do with CBET 2030 and JEPCO.
Yeah, I think there are clearly some large technicalities, as has already been explained by Jan-Bart, about trying to database every type of ocean data set. But I think in the bathymetry world, it's slightly easier because we are really only looking at time, position, and depth. And we have established the International Hydrographic Organization's Data Center for Digital Bathymetry, which has been very kindly, very generously provided by NOAA, hosted in Boulder, Colorado. And that sets out to database all bathymetry that has been made available to it. And generally, those data sets are made publicly available, but they can be withheld if there are conditions or restrictions, particularly coastal state restrictions around that. So in the bathymetry side of the house is a little bit more straightforward. But also, we've actually only ever mapped just under a quarter of the ocean. So actually, there's still 3/4 still to go. So we're still expecting vast amounts of data. But the IHO DCDB is geared up to be able to accept that. And that's from any route. That's from full-scale scientific wide area surveys right down to information that comes from private citizens through crowdsourced bathymetry. But I think as Julian touched on, we believe that there is at least 20% more of the ocean mapped. So there's about 45% of the ocean mapped altogether. That 20% we have yet to access. It's yet to be made available. It's tied up in governments databases, it's tied up in some industry databases, and undoubtedly some academic databases. So there's still a challenge there in trying to free that up.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Jamie. And I think this is exactly what our focal point is. For instance, one of the more easy, low-hanging fruit type of data sets is bathymetry data, and that's what we're focusing also in the corporate data group, and also a few other data sets, but this is one of them. And for instance, for our company in Fugro, we have decided to actually collect data when we are in transit, so when we're not working for customers and the data is not from them, but that we actually are in transit going from one project to the other. We just collect data and we donate it to CBET 2030 JEPCO. And we already collected more than 2 million square kilometers of data and donated that. So quite a lot of data, and that's still very small in comparison to the whole world and the 75% that still needs to be done. So I think that we have a big task there, but we'll get there. And 2030 is luckily still some years away. So, but we're making progress, and I think there's also more traction now that companies really feel, okay, we can contribute, and we should also do something with this. Is there any other question? Yes, over here. Let's see if we can get a microphone to you. It's coming up there.
Yeah, hello. Thank you. I'm Professor Justin from University of Barbiere. I've got my colleague here, Dr. Alvin. I remember COP27. There was a presentation by Steve Hall on CBET 2030. And this question I'm asking, I did ask the same thing.
Okay.
Looking at your panel, I don't see Africa represented. And some of us get worried. Why are we always left behind? We are part of the global community, and I can reasonably say that most of the data you are collecting will definitely maybe not cover Africa's interests, and if it does, we are not even factored in albination. I raised that, and I got some collaboration with Steve. Incidentally, he's not here this year for some reasons. So I need that to be addressed, please. We need to be carried along because we lack facilities. Expertise is very low, but we need to start from somewhere, especially now that these are very new initiatives, and it's about data, so that we can begin to tag along and feel belonging, and also position generation next. That's one. Secondly, I'd like to, in the ocean decay challenges, if you can go back to that slide, challenges 2 and 4. Yeah, challenge 2, protect and restore ecosystems biodiversity. And then 4, develop sustainable and equitable ocean economy. So again, it's connected. How equitable can this be if the African aspects are not properly captured? We'll still find ourselves catching up when the rest of the world has, moved on. So we need to have you seriously look at this. I did raise this before. I'm interested, even for the Spain meeting in April. Because of this, I'm planning to be there. I'm working on a poster and all that. So, but just see how you can factor us in. Then the last, please, data information recovery and reusability. Right now, for example, I have some graduate students I'm teaching, we have difficulty accessing data. There is a lot within the coastal environment. We're not even talking about the deep ocean, but we can't even access it. So you may even look at this as a given, but it's very, very tough for us. Even having access to internet facilities for our students is difficult. So sometimes you give us link, you give us stuff. The students find it difficult. My colleague here can tell you that, for example, in the country I'm talking about, to even get data to get access. So we need to be factored and given a special place from where we are right now. I'm just using this as an example, and I know it's repetitive in most African countries. So please, I need this to be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for addressing this, and I'm going to give the word to briefly to Julian, maybe to somebody else as well, and I have a few things to say about this as well. But Julian, first.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the reality check, because that's exactly what I was also hinting at the beginning, saying that we're not in an equal world, and we know that institutions are lacking that kind of infrastructure capacity in terms of handling, analyzing data, generating data into products and information. So I think this has to be one of the objectives in terms of a decade, in really trying to leveling the playing field and provide those capacities through projects, through actions, and also creating this national capacity. I think we have in IOC, for example, national ocean data centers. We have about 120 of those that have been established around the world. I'm not quite sure what is the situation in Liberia, but those are the basis for building that technical infrastructure where we can really then create collaborations at the regional and international level. So I think what I wanted to say is that the decade is also looking at Africa very carefully. We have a decade African task force, which has been established last year. We have 15 members in that group, and they actually have a task of translating the 9 priorities that were identified through a conference that took place in 2022 and transforming those into regional programs and actions. So I can certainly connect you with that group. So you can also bring some of those issues that you have in your country and in the region, so they can also try to shape that up. And there will be a very strong event in Barcelona led by this group, so with a focus on the needs of IOC Africa. For the other part of the question, I'll refer back to the boss of Steve, who's Steve, sitting there.
Yeah.
Professor, thank you very much for your intervention, and you did raise some really good points. I mean, I can only speak for part of Steve Hall's time, because he does work part-time as the head of partnerships for Seabed 2030. He also does other work, and I think he's also doing some work with you on access to the decade. I was just checking an email that he'd previously sent a little while ago. But one of the things I think is, and I can only speak for Seabed 2030, but we are very much about making partnerships and engaging and becoming a global community of ocean mappers to deliver the GEBCO product, which is part of the GEBCO program that's been in existence since 1903 and is delivered as a public service for all to use, free to download. So that's really the focus of Seabed 2030, to accelerate the GEBCO program and deliver it by the end of the decade. But in doing that, we have 4 regional centres. We've only got 4 because we can't afford any more. But one of our centres, one that covers 40% of the ocean space, is the Atlantic and Indian Ocean Centre, which is based at Columbia University. Dr. Vicky Farini is here this week for the next 2 days. I just wonder if we talk offline after this, and I'll see if I can connect you with her so you can perhaps meet her tomorrow. But she is very happy to work with organisations, with institutions, with students, with individuals, as is her team. And part of her team, some come from the Africa region, to actually help that community. So we're working together. We're not there to take data. We're there to manipulate data, to make it available, to share it. So I think there's an opportunity there to work closely together.
Thank you very much, Jamie. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, one small thing.
One small practical example, as this is about also the role of the private sector in this, that I have a really nice example from Mozambique where we were working on a project for mangrove restoration, and we specifically engaged the local community but also the local university, and we taught them how to collect the data and make the relevant measurements in the mangrove forest around the hydrological conditions there, so that I think fundamentally the private sector also has a role to play in this capacity building element. And when we are operating in Africa, in this point of your question, I would really like to discuss with you how you see that the private sector can also better engage with the local universities and help with that capacity building process as well.
Thank you, Rachel. And then last but not least, we're going to wrap it up. Thank you very much for the reminder there. I was responsible for Africa for more than 10 years in Fugro. I've done most of the survey work myself, partly as well in many countries in Africa, and I know a lot of the data is available. And in actual fact, the corporate data group has picked one of the African countries because there's a big gap, and we know there's a lot of data, which is Angola in this case, but there are many other examples like Mozambique, Nigeria, and other places, Congo, Gabon, many countries bordering obviously the sea, and we can do a lot there. So we're definitely going to focus on that. And to be honest, actually one of the African countries is top of the list because we want to actually start there because it's a great example. So I think we're definitely listening very carefully, and hopefully when you ask the question again in Barcelona, we have maybe even a better answer. So thank you very much for your question. So I want to thank everyone here participating, obviously first and foremost in the panel, Jan-Bart, Erik, Rachel, Julian, thank you very much for participating. I really appreciate that. If there are more questions, please stay around and ask the questions to whoever you want to ask the question. Special thanks to Jan-Bart for dialing in. Obviously you can't stay for a drink, but thank you very much there next time. And I think we're all talking about the science we need for the oceans we want. Thank you very much.